Do not search the dag. First look to the one who knows the hammam inch by inch. But how did we get here? It is told that Jawhara opened the safekeeping chest in the hammam and did not find her mother's necklace. She lifted the wrapped cloth from the tiles. Nothing remained in the chest but the fabric and droplets of water along the edge. And between Jawhara and Hanan, there had been bread and salt for years. It was Hanan who fastened the necklace around her neck, the very first time, on the day the women returned from her mother's mourning. And Taha was her betrothed. He was the one who read her the last line of her mother's letter, when grief had stolen the voice from the house. فَقَالَ Jawhara, who entered this passage after me? The women fell silent, and they heard the drip of water on stone. فَقَالَ Hanan, Taha went in alone. He said he came to fetch the dowry record. Faces turned toward Taha, and the marriage registrar was already on his way. فَقَالَ Jawhara, the wrapping was left in order. Whoever took the necklace knew exactly where it lay before reaching out a hand. From the very first moment, the accusation narrowed. This was no longer the work of some passing hand. فَقَالَ bathhouse attendant, the outer door is under my watch. No one has gone out since the crowd grew thick. The necklace now seemed closer to the people of the hammam itself. Heads tilted toward the narrow room. فَقَالَ Taha, by the furnace door there is the edge of a wet garment. Whoever stood there after Jawhara left. Taha raised his hand toward the little room. And from that direction came a faint smell, like something left too near the fire. فَقَالَ bathhouse attendant, no one stood by the furnace except the servant girl and Hanan. Hanan's name fell among the people like a stone. Hanan wiped her palm once with her kerchief and did not lift her eyes. فَقَالَ Hanan, the servant girl passed that way carrying a wet sheet. With that one line, a new name entered the gathering, and for a moment the balance tipped away from Hanan. فَقَالَ Jawhara, if the necklace is still here, let it appear before the marriage registrar arrives. The whole gathering went silent. The smell of rough village soap mingled with something scorched by the vent. So would the furnace lead them to the necklace, or drive them to accuse the innocent? They stepped out into the hall by the gate of the alley, and the words were spoken loud enough for those inside and those outside to hear. Even the water running through the channel sounded clearer than before. فَقَالَ Hanan, I saw him by the room at the very hour the necklace vanished. The accusation fastened itself to one exact moment. Hanan was no longer tossing out words on mere suspicion. فَقَالَ Taha, open the dowry register before the people. He handed them the register with his own hand. His fingers trembled as he held it out. They opened it. The dry papers crackled between their hands, and they found nothing inside but papers and the little ring. فَقَالَ Jawhara, the register is cleared of suspicion. One face of doubt broke apart, but doubt itself did not leave the hammam. فَقَالَ Taha, by the door of the room there was the edge of a wet garment, and that wetness came after Jawhara had left. Taha brought a new thread into the case. He did not stop at pushing the blame from his own name. فَقَالَ Jawhara, who had clothes in her hands then? فَقَالَ Hanan, I had a blue dress in my hand, and the maid passed by carrying a wet sheet. Hanan placed herself and the maid in the same line of account, and once again she wiped her palm with the kerchief until its corner twisted. فَقَالَ Taha, if the maid tells us what each one was carrying, we will know which hand was empty. Here the question shifted from the place to what the hands had carried, and the balance of words changed. At that very moment, Qadi Nasir arrived. He had come to inspect the hammam before the water rose. So he heard the quarrel at the door and entered. His wooden prayer beads spun beneath his thumb. فَقَالَ Qadi Nasir, who turned the inquiry toward the furnace? فَقَالَ Taha, I did. because the wetness was by the room door. The Qadi took the first thread from the mouth of the man they had accused. He did not begin with the owner of the necklace. فَقَالَ قَادِي نَصِيرٌ. And who said the necklace cord could not have come near that spot? فَقَالَ Jawhara. I did. Its cord is old silk from my mother's hand. فَقَالَ قَادِي نَصِيرٌ. Walk before me inside. I want the furnace, the garment, and the maid. They went ahead of him into the hammam. And for the first time, suspicion had begun to lean away from Taha. But can the eye uncover what hands have hidden? Or will the necklace be lost between two names before the water rises? They sat by the hearth in the inner hall. The sound of water came softly from the basin, and the room fell so still they could hear the wood creak. فَقَالَ قَادِي نَصِيرٌ. The contract is still here. The door has spoken. The Qadi built this on the bathhouse attendant's word. Then he turned every eye inward. فَقَالَ قَادِي نَصِيرٌ. Tell me again about the thread, Jawhara. فَقَالَ Jawhara. It is old silk. If steam lingers on it too long, it weakens and snaps. The Qadi took that word the way a man takes up a flame. He looked at the hearth, then at the hanging clothes. فَقَالَ قَادِي نَصِيرٌ. Pour more water on the stone. Let the steam reach the whole hall. He did not ask for a search. He let the gathering look at the clothes, not at the people. The smell of hot water rose with the soap. فَقَالَ عَامِلُ الْحَمَّامِ. The steam will reach even the hanging clothes. At once, two faces changed. Hanan lifted a hand to her throat, then lowered it, and Taha bent over the register at his feet. فَقَالَ Taha. This blue ribbon was not in the register when we opened it at the door. He lifted a wet blue ribbon from between the pages. Its end fell against the tile and clung there. Every eye swung toward it at once. فَقَالَ Jawhara. That is from the contract wrapping. In that moment, suspicion returned to Taha. No one answered. The ribbon stayed on the floor between their feet. فَقَالَ قَادِي نَصِيرٌ. Leave it where it is. All of you, step away from the clothes. They all drew back a single step. Hanan wiped her brow before the steam grew thick, and after that, Taha did not reach for a thing. فَقَالَ قَادِي نَصِيرٌ. Now we wait for what the hands will reveal. The words hung between them, and the ribbon on the tile pulled suspicion toward Taha. But would suspicion hold fast to him, or would another hand reach first for a place no one had yet named? The hall fell silent after the Qadi's words. Then the bathhouse attendant opened the steam channel, and the fire beneath the furnace roared louder. The heat thickened over the wet tiles. The smell of olive soap and rose grew sharper in the chamber, and the drip of water beneath the stone dome rang clearer, because no one dared speak. Taha stood where he had first stood. He clasped his hands behind his back until their trembling disappeared, and the wet blue ribbon still lay at his feet. As the Jawhara, her eyes settled on the ribbon for a moment. Then she lifted her gaze to Hanan. She touched the edge of her sleeve once with her thumb, then let it go. فَقَالَ Jawhara. The ribbon came from the wrapping. Yes. But whoever touched it after me touched the necklace or the place where it was hidden. With that single sentence, she widened suspicion from the man standing at the door to the hand that reached the same thing afterward. فَقَالَ Taha. And there is fresh water on the ribbon. If it had left the bath an hour ago, it would have dried. That was the second revelation to come from Taha. He tied the dampness to a place close to steam and moisture, Hanan heard that and wiped her brow with the edge of her kerchief. Then she cast a quick glance at the clothes hanging near the furnace. فَقَالَ قَادِي نَاصِرٌ, step away from the walls and the clothes. Damp will creep into every cloth in here. He said it to everyone. He did not point to any corner. He turned the whole chamber into a single trap. The people moved toward the middle. They drew away from the hanging garments. Even Taha took half a step back, then held fast. Hanan, at first, loosened a little when she saw every eye still fixed on the ribbon by Taha's foot. Then her face tightened again when the steam touched the edges of the clothes near the furnace. فَقَالَ Hanan, Lord, keep us safe. The heat today outruns the breath. It sounded like an ordinary prayer, but it was the first word she had spoken to the heat itself, not to the accusation. And the Qadi ran his thumb along his olive wood prayer beads and let the silence do its work. The bathhouse attendant fed the fire once more. The steam climbed faster, and the air turned heavy on the skin. Then came the thing that fear alone does not make a person do. Hanan did not reach for some visible garment before her, as anyone afraid for everything would do. Instead, she suddenly bent toward one single spot near the furnace. There was a row of clothes hanging there, and behind them a coarse laundry sack. Even so, Hanan thrust her hand between the clothes without a moment's hesitation. She did not search. Her fingers went straight to a hidden pocket inside the sack, as if her hand were racing the steam to a secret only she knew. فَقَالَ Jawhara, Hanan! The word flew out of Jawhara, quick and sharp, then dropped at the end, and the whole gathering froze. فَقَالَ قَادِي نَاصِرٌ, stop! He halted her at that very instant, before she could pull anything out, and before she could cover what she had done with her other hand. Hanan remained bent over. Her hand stayed inside the sack, neither moving forward nor drawing back. And her kerchief slipped onto the wet tiles. فَقَالَ قَادِي نَاصِرٌ, Jawhara, put your hand where hers reached. He wanted the truth to come out from the very place Hanan had known before anyone else. Jawhara steps forward. She reached her hand through the warm clothes behind the furnace. Then she slipped her fingers into the sack's inner pocket, where Hanan's hand had stopped a moment before. Everyone was silent. By then, the movement spoke more clearly than words. Then Jawhara drew out something small, wrapped in warm cloth. She unfolded it with shaking hands, and a pearl necklace flashed above the wet tiles, as if the whole bathhouse had gasped in one breath. Her mother's necklace came out from the very place Hanan's hand alone had reached before the search, before anyone had gone near that sack. فَقَالَ Taha, now the hand has spoken. He said it in that same written calm of his, and this time he let his hands fall to his sides. Jawhara held the necklace in her palms. She looked at Hanan. She touched the edge of her sleeve with her thumb, then let it go, and Hanan did not deny it. She stood still, with only a small tremor in her shoulder. In that moment, the blue ribbon on the floor had grown too small to carry the whole case, and the steam they had feared for the thread became the very thing that drove the hand to its secret. But the Qadi still did not pronounce judgment. He left the necklace in Jawhara's hand, and he let silence descend on the chamber once again. So what would he say when he gathered all this movement into one single word? A word that would cut through injustice and reveal the price. Silence hung over the hall, and the heat of the brazier still beat against the stone. In Jawhara's hand, the necklace lay utterly still, now that it had been drawn out of the warm folds of cloth. Qadi Nasir lifted his eyes to Hanan. He ran his thumb once over his olive wood prayer beads, Then he looked at the blue ribbon by Taha's foot. Then he looked at the place Hanan's hand had reached before any other hand. فَقَالَ قَادِي نَسِيرٌ. Listen. The ribbon turned all eyes toward Taha. But the ribbon does not judge by itself. I did not ask about a pouch or a corner. I said only this. The steam will grow stronger on every piece of cloth in the hall. If Hanan had been innocent, she would have stood where everyone stood. She would have said, "Search." But she thrust her hand into a hidden inner pocket before anyone had searched a single garment. That is not what a person does when she hears of a danger to all. That is what she does when she knows where the silk thread is choking. The very thread Jawhara spoke of. Her hand has testified against her. By the witness of that single movement, Taha is cleared of the charge in full, and Hanan is condemned for hiding the necklace and wrongfully bringing this night to a halt. The necklace will be returned to its owner at once, and the sick boy shall be helped from the household money to mend what nearly was ruined. Not to cover a wrong. At last, Taha lifted his head. He no longer clasped his hands behind his back. As for Jawhara, she stood rooted where she was, the necklace in her hand. Hanan did not raise her eyes. She looked at the wet tiles where her kerchief had fallen. Then only one line came from her, and no more. So qala Hanan, I lost my daughter before I could save my son. Then the whole hall fell silent, until they could hear nothing but the sound of water. A pearl necklace gleamed once more above the wet tiles, but the trust that had stood between two hearts, and between a hand and the child it had raised for years, was no longer clear as it had been. And at dawn, the water still slipped in drops over the hammam tiles, but this time the necklace had returned to its place. After absence had nearly swallowed love before the marriage contract could reach the quarter. If you enjoyed the story, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell to hear new tales every week.